Today I'm talking to Dr. Katie Steckles, a mainstay of the UK maths communication scene. Katie's involved in more projects than I could possibly name. Number 5 viewers may recognise her from videos about Rubik's Cubes, pancake numbers, the Poincare conjecture, and Langton's ant, plus a bunch of others. Her journey's been an interesting one, full of lots of useful lessons. But beware, there may be pirates ahead. Katie, I was looking at your website earlier this morning. You do so many things. You have your fingers in so many pies. What do you put on, like, a passport form when you've got to put, like, occupation?
I tend to just put mathematician.
Mathematician?
Yeah, and hope nobody asks any further questions. I guess, I mean, there's probably some people who would claim that I'm not really allowed to call myself a mathematician because I'm not actively doing research in maths at a university, but I kind of feel like it's more of a state of mind than a job title. So, you know, if you think like a mathematician, then you are a mathematician. I don't know. What
do you think your family says, like at Christmas gatherings when someone says, oh, what's Katie doing these days? How do you think, they would describe your job?
I have no idea. You could sort of describe me as a presenter, I guess, because like most of the work that I do and get paid for is kind of communicating, presenting maths. But I guess I'm very keen to present myself as being a mathematician, because if I stand up in front of a room full of people and say I'm a mathematician, if I can do something to kind of nudge their perception of what a mathematician is or what a mathematician looks like, I'd much rather do that. And if I stand up and I'm just another person who's like a teacher, that doesn't necessarily help with that sort of stereotype. So
yeah. Well, all right, let me decide if you're a mathematician by hearing a little bit more of your story. Let's go to the very beginning. Where were you born? And were you born into a very mathematical family?
I don't know, actually. It was definitely a very kind of supportive and, pro-learning family, I guess. Both my parents had the willingness to learn and go to school and were very kind of grateful for the opportunity to go to school. Like, my mum did the exam and got into the local grammar school and was over the moon with herself. And they both actually work in the NHS, or worked. They're both retired now.
Right.
So my mum was an occupational therapist, did a big long sort of training for that, and my dad was a chiropodist who also had previously worked as a technical illustrator, and towards the end of his career he went into sort of more IT within the NHS type stuff.
Okay.
So there was always a very supportive home environment, with like my dad buying far too many computers and leaving them lying around, and my mum studied. I think while we were kids she kind of stopped working in order to have kids, but then just did an open university degree in her spare time. So she kind of continued learning and training, so it was always that kind of vibe.
And whereabouts is this? Is this like Manchester way, or?
Yeah, just outside of Manchester.
Were you like, nerdy, mathy, computery?
Yeah, I was the worst. I was an awful nerd.
Yeah. As
a kid, I was just, that person who's always super keen and turns up and answers all the questions very quickly. I felt like I maybe just had a lot of different interests. So there wasn't any one particular subject that jumped out as being my favourite subject when I was at school. Like, I was definitely into computers a lot. Definitely kind of good at maths, good at science, interested in things, keen to have a go at everything. But I think it was maybe when I got to A-level that I started thinking about what I actually wanted to focus on.
So when you were younger than A-levels, like when you were a little girl, were you more likely to be playing with dinosaurs and things like that? Or like what would have been like your toys and things?
I think a mixture, So there was a lot of Lego.
Right.
A decent amount of Meccano.
Right. A decent amount, right.
Yeah. Not too much, just the right amount. But like Lego, but Lego Technic as well. So like the stuff that you can make cars and things out of.
You put me back in my place.
I was very into like making things. So there was always a very strong kind of, don't throw away any yogurt pots or toilet rolls, put them in that box that Katie's going to use to make something out of.
Right.
And I would always go and see my granddad and hang out in his shed and hammer nails into bits of wood for no reason.
Right.
I just enjoyed kind of physical hands-on making things.
So when you were a little girl, if someone had said, oh, Katie, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you're in that genre of the answer being, fireman, ballerina, astronaut, that sort of stuff, what would little Katie have said?
I think at one point it definitely was carpenter.
Right.
That was definitely the answer to that question at one point, and then it was journalist, I think, for a little while.
Ah, right, yeah.
But it was kind of, like, as well as all of that, I did also have loads of dolls.
Right.
But they would, like, I'd kind of build, like, houses, and, like, there was, the upper shelves of my bedroom would have, like, a little pulley system that you could use to carry things up to the upper shelves and things like that.
Right.
It was, just everything all mashed in together. And I think probably having an older brother meant that I was always like, I want to do the things that Rick's doing. So,
Right.
you know, I played football, I did, you know, a lot of things that maybe weren't expected of me, but no one really cared, so I just went for it.
So, like, you might have had a Barbie, but she would have had an awesome Meccano car.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Right, yeah. So, mathematics isn't at the forefront at this point, it's just in the mix until a bit later.
Yeah, and I think maybe in terms of early influences, my second cousin, once removed, so my grand's husband's brother's son, you know,
Okay, I think I get that.
Yeah.
You might need to draw me a diagram.
Someone that I go and visit once every couple of months, basically, in my family, did maths at Cambridge.
Okay.
And it was probably when I was sort of at sort of high school age, and we'd go around and visit, and he would occasionally like show me little things, like little maths tricks and puzzles and things.
Yeah.
And my parents definitely remember sort of long sessions where I would just sit there and be like, show me some more stuff, what's this, tell me about this thing. And that was kind of a really nice sort of way to get excited about it, I think. Was
there any extent to which like you were impressed by him? You thought that's the sort of person I want to be like, or was it purely just like the content? It wasn't like he's cool and he's a mathematician. It was just the puzzles are cool. I want to learn more about the puzzles.
I think it was definitely the maths. Yeah, it was the puzzles. I mean, he's a lovely guy. I'm not doing him down at all.
No.
But he's like now an accountant, which is a really aspirational thing to be when you go and do maths at uni. It's like the solid career that you get out of doing maths. And I think like I'm now the person who's buying him like recreational popular maths books, and he's really excited by those. So it goes both ways.
The wheel has turned full circle, sort of thing. Okay, so this is in like high school. Mathematics starts to capture you more and more. Do you then zero in on that at high school? Are you thinking this is it? This is my career?
Well, I think so. I picked my A levels because at the time, post journalism phase, I went through a being a doctor phase.
Right.
I think I was just watching a lot of ER at the time, and like genuinely, that is literally what was happening. And my brain just went, "Oh, I could be a doctor. I could work in an ER or whatever."
Yeah.
And I talked to the careers advisor and this, that, and the other, and they said, "Okay, well, if you want to go into medicine, you need maths, biology, chemistry, and then I guess you could do physics, but maybe don't." Because then you'd just be doing 4 sciences, so maybe do something like a language with that.
Yeah.
And that's what I went for. I'm not sure whether that specific advice that I got was because I'm female. Like, I definitely know that there were guys in my year who did chemistry, physics, maths, biology.
Yeah.
And I kind of always regretted not doing A-level physics because it feels like there's just a chunk of my knowledge that's missing. But I've got some A-level physics revision guides on the shelf that I keep meaning to go through and kind of train myself up on, because, there's a lot of cool stuff in there.
What language did you do?
I did French.
Right.
So it's kind of nice that I could speak a bit of French, and I've still got most of the stuff in there, but a lot of the vocab's disappeared, so
yeah.
I would be vaguely useful at French right now. But I think it did kind of broaden me a little bit.
And then did you go off being a doctor, or?
I think it was less that I went off the idea of being a doctor, and more that once I started doing A-level maths, I was like, oh, this is good.
Yeah.
Like I started to see a bit more of where maths was going and what kind of stuff you can do with it. And like our A-level maths teacher I think it was the head of maths, because we were taught by a few different people for different modules, but the person who taught us mostly basically just kept bringing in interesting stuff and giving us little puzzles to do and that kind of thing, and it kind of grabbed my attention, and I was like, this subject is much bigger than I thought it was, and there's a lot of cool stuff in here, and this is now what I want to do.
All right, so then it was like all in on maths, and that's what you aimed for at uni and stuff.
Yeah, and I think at the time there was also an aspect of kind of the realisation that if I did go into medicine, that would be very much locked in for the next sort of at least 7 years for training, plus probably at least a few years after that for actually working. Like, I would be stuck on that one path.
Yeah.
And I talked to a few people about the idea of what do I want to be when I grow up. And I think it was like our head of music at school was a former concert pianist who'd also been a postie prior to that.
Right.
And like thinking about my dad, who was like doing all these different roles within his job and doing, other stuff before that, and thinking, actually, I don't need to just pick a lane. Like I can do various different jobs in my life. Like, what's going to set me up the best for that? And I think a maths degree, you know, there are some things that naturally come out of that, like maybe being an accountant, but like you're not then tied into that in the same way that you would be with medicine, I guess.
Okay. So, because my next question was going to be, and you've sort of preempted it, but my next question was going to be, when you chose to do mathematics at university, but before you got to university, what job did you imagine you were going to end up doing? But you were totally open-minded at that point.
Yeah, I think I was deliberately trying not to think too hard about that question, I guess.
Right.
You know, because, you know, it's a kind of degree that essentially just says to an employer, this person is quite switched on and is good at problem solving and is good at learning new stuff really quickly. Yeah. And, you know, there's a lot of like management roles and things where they'll just take a maths graduate because they know that they'll be a useful person. So I was sort of having that in mind and, you know, thinking about what kind of things do I want to do with my life, and I didn't really want to pin myself down.
You mentioned before at school you were wondering whether some of the advice you got was based on the fact that you were female. At high school, were you in quite mixed classes, or were you surrounded by boys, or like when you were doing maths and that?
It was a mixture. So that's not a simple question to answer. So I started at a mixed high school.
Yeah.
And because, as mentioned, I was an awful nerd, I was quite badly bullied in the first couple of years of high school.
Okay.
So we had a sort of family meeting discussion, and we discussed whether it'd be possible to move to a different school. And there was a fee-paying grammar school in the next town over.
Right.
We kind of went to some open days and chatted around it, and we decided to go there. And my mum started working again in order to pay for it. Like, it was a big decision. And I went there, and that was an all-girls school.
Okay.
So I kind of went out from this mixed environment to an all-girls environment. And but at the same time, I had lots of hobbies. So I was in a brass band for 20 years or whatever, with a mixed group. So all of my friends were kind of all over. And for sixth form, I went back to the first school again. Partly just to be like, you know, I'll show them.
Yeah.
But also the people that were bullying me pretty much weren't going to stay on for A-level. So I wasn't too worried. So it was a mixture of those two things. And I think it was really nice to sort of go to a different school and be like, oh, actually, no, people are horrible everywhere. I just need to deal with this. Like, that was the main lesson I learned, was that there are horrible people wherever you go, and it's about your attitude more than anything else.
I can imagine when you're getting bullied a bit and you've got like nerdy interests, you know, nerdy in quotation marks, it would be quite easy to turn your back on those interests, or sort of, you know, go with the crowd and forsake them just for the sake of avoiding the hassle. That never came into your thinking? You never thought, oh, maybe if I just quit the puzzles and the Meccano and just, you know, go with the flow, it'll just make my life easier?
Like, with the support that I had from my family, I never felt like that was necessary.
Right.
And I think partly I kind of saw myself as being a rule breaker, except that the rules I was breaking were the rules that my peers imposed on me, not the actual rules. Like, I was being a rebel in the sense that I was probably the only person to ever go into the school uniform shop and say, do you have a longer skirt?
Right.
And the person looked at me and was like, what are you? Like, no one's ever asked that question before.
Yeah.
But, you know, I wasn't interested in following the sort of norms that people were presenting. And I think having made that move and gone, oh, actually, no, it's not me. This is just how the world works. Anyone who's slightly different is going to get knocked around.
Yeah.
I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to double down. I'm just going to be myself, and I'm going to decide what cool is. And for me, being cool is being a nice person and looking after your friends and being interested in things.
Yeah.
So
doing loads of puzzles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where did you get in and go to university?
So I decided pretty quickly that I wanted to go to uni in Manchester because I didn't want to move too far away from home. There was also the option to live at home for the first year, which would save quite a lot of money, which was quite useful. Yeah. And in Manchester at the time, there were two universities. There was Manchester and UMIST, where UMIST is essentially the nerd version of Manchester because it had all the science and technology traditional stuff.
Okay.
So I applied for UMIST, and my UCAS form was literally just UMIST at the top, and then I just made up 5 like random choices to go underneath it because I was definitely going to UMIST and there was no point in applying anywhere else.
Okay.
But I put like, you know, Manchester, I don't know, Leeds, Liverpool, Sheffield, like just some nearby places that I didn't care about. And they were all emailing me going, come to an open day. I was like, whatever. Definitely going to UMIST.
Okay.
And I got a good offer from there. And I actually technically didn't make my offer for uni.
Because we obviously have a lot of, like, you know, American listeners. Explain how the system works then to get into university.
Yeah, so you pick your A-levels. I mean, it's all changed very slightly since then as well, because...
A-levels is like your final year of high school.
Yeah, so you kind of pick maybe 3 or 4 subjects to do there, and then the university makes you an offer that will be, say, for instance, 3 A's and a B or whatever. And depending on the course and the university, those offers might be higher or lower. If they like you and they want you to come, they'll give you a lower offer. So I got...
So this is kind of like setting the bar, saying, we'll take you, but as long as you score these results, and if you get lower than those results, then your offer's off the table.
Yeah, or at least we'll have to talk, you know.
Okay.
Like we'll have a more serious conversation, but yeah. So my offer, I think, was A in maths, B, D.
Right.
So they were like, get an A in maths and then B and whatever. Like, we don't care. Yeah. Which was quite a nice sort of feeling that actually, you know, this was slightly lower. I think the standard offer was A, B, C or A, B, B.
Yeah.
And it was nice to know that they were keen enough to have me there, that they would offer it lower. Although I technically... for various logistical reasons, didn't actually get an A in maths.
Oh.
This is my secret shame.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care. I've got a PhD now.
Yeah.
The way it fell out was you kind of split it into different modules, and there were a couple of modules. There were so few people taking A-level maths at our school. There were about 6 of us, I think. And there were a couple of modules where it was just me and one other guy who were doing those particular topics. And this other guy had basically given up on the idea of school. Like, he's a lovely guy, he's one of my really good friends, but he basically spent the whole time like looking on his phone, doing other things and not really paying attention. And it was, I mean, I'm not blaming this at all. Obviously, I've got my own, you know, I'm my own person. I'm not too influenced by this, but it kind of threw the teaching a little bit. You can imagine if you've only got 2 people in the room and one of them doesn't care,
right,
like, what you're going to do. But it meant that for a couple of modules I didn't do as well as I should have. So I think I'm going to say the lowest mark I got in anything was like a 52%.
Okay.
So I'm not failing things, but it was basically numbers that you have to sort of shuffle around into different combinations. Yeah. And I remember my maths teacher sitting down with post-it notes trying to arrange this so that we could make it so that I could get an A overall. And she was like, I'm really sorry because this has got to go somewhere and I can't combine it with other things in the right kind of way. There's rules about how it all, you know, like these 3 modules make up your first year and these 3 modules make up your second year, but you can kind of shuffle things around a bit. And as it was, I got technically a B in maths at A-level.
What do you mean technically a B? You got
a B.
Yeah.
And it's because I was also doing AS level, which is like half an extra A level in further maths. Yeah. So it was between those 3 kind of chunks of maths. I had to shuffle everything around. I remember on results day kind of looking at this and going, okay, this is terrifying. Have I not got into uni? And ringing up the admissions office at UMIST and someone going, oh, no, don't be ridiculous. We definitely want you to come here. Don't worry, you're fine.
So that was an ambit claim asking for an A. They were going to take you anyway.
Yeah, and I think like if they've met you and they've had a chat with you and you're like, this is an intelligent person, they're going to do well. You know, they can make notes to that effect and they'll know.
Jumping forward briefly, now that you're, you know, alpha math woman and like, you know, Ms. Mathematics, do your friends who know you got a B in mathematics at school rib you about this all the time?
Oh, no one knows. No. No one I went to uni with knows. I mean, they do now. But like, it's sort of irrelevant, right?
Oh, yeah, well,
kinda, it's just a number on a piece of paper.
I'm still going to give you a hard time about it.
Hey, I got 99% in one of those exams. Like, you're not getting 99% if you're not, you know, at least...
God, imagine what you would have got without that. You would have been on like a D or a C. So you end up at university. What was that experience like? Was it everything you dreamed?
It was very cool, yeah. So UMIST, as was, merged with Manchester while I was still at uni. So there was a whole pile of kind of bureaucracy and temporary buildings and, you know, everything being changed. But it was a lovely course, and, you know, both UMIST and Manchester have some really nice lecturers. It was just wonderful to sort of discover all these aspects of this subject, and loads of really good friends that I made there. I mean, one of which I married, so I can't really argue with the quality of friends that I got out of that. But, you know, I also took loads of opportunities to do loads of other things outside of the course. So, like, I was in the trampolining club.
Yeah.
At one point, I was bosun of the Pirate Society, which is a great thing to be able to say.
Oh my goodness. Like, you've just thrown trampolines and pirates at me. Like, my brain is jammed.
We've already been over the fact that I do too many things, right?
Yeah.
This is essentially a brand that I have.
Yeah.
And I also joined and at one point was president and secretary of the Caving Club. So I did speleology for the whole time I was at uni.
All right. So Caving Club, cool. Trampolining, awesome. But I feel like I can imagine what you do in both of those. What does the Pirate Society do?
Mainly, we dress up and go on pub crawls and raise money for charity. Because that sort of feels piratey, right? You know, taking money from people, but in a very legal way.
You realise piracy's not legal, don't you?
Well, yeah, but it is if you're just asking for donations to the university charities. We did a bit of that, and we'd go to like the Freshers' Fair at the start of the year, and we didn't actually sign up for our own stall. We just stole things from other people's stalls.
Okay. Yeah.
It was, and just argued with the Royal Navy recruiters outside.
Did you have a pirate name, like a character name, when you were in pirate mode?
No, just me.
No?
Just me dressed as a pirate. I won the award for Best Dressed Pirate one year.
Yeah? What's the key to a good pirate outfit?
Just flair, I think. Just having some piratey bits, but just...
Would you have a parrot or an eye patch or...
inflatable parrot.
Right. Did you ever go the peg leg?
I didn't go that far, no.
No?
Okay. But some good boots, some quality, like, faux suede boots.
I'm imagining at university, like, you are fitting in more. Now you're surrounded by, people for whom being smart and interested is like, a defining quality.
I mean, surprisingly, there are still people there who think they're too cool and are just like, oh, I'm here to get a good career. What are you here for? So you kind of seek out the people that are on the same wavelength and make friends with them. And, I had a bunch of friends on my course and off my course from all these other activities that I was doing. And but it's really nice to sort of be surrounded by people who agree with you about how cool maths is. University is fantastic, and I know that not everyone goes and not everyone gets the opportunity to go, but it is such a really nice place to sort of be around people who are interested in the same things as you and are all working towards the same goal for a few years.
Did your perception of mathematics change much when you made that jump from high school to mathematics and being lectured by professional mathematicians?
Oh, I think definitely, yeah. Like, school maths is really just about methods. It's about learning techniques that you can use to solve problems. And you kind of start to get glimpses of what maths really is, but you're not really doing proper maths. And at university, it just totally flips on its head. And it's like, right, now we're proving things. Right, we're not just going to take things for granted. We're going to prove everything. We're going to go strip it down, be rigorous about it. And by the way, there's so many more things in maths than you ever possibly realised. Yes, there are numbers. Numbers still exist. But also there's these beautiful algebraic abstract structures that don't really exist that you can just build from definitions from the ground up and then use them to do things. And oh, look, they pop up again over here. And there's, all these different branches and probability and operational research and applied maths and modelling and all of these things that, cryptography and coding theory and things that just hadn't even occurred to you were maths. And it's a really nice place to be, to sort of be able to look out across that vista, but you're also at the same time aware suddenly of how much you don't know, which you could take either way, but I think I took it as being quite exciting.
Did you excel as a student, or were you a good student, or was the distraction of caves and trampolines and pirates like, nibbling into your study time? Or
I think I did okay, yeah. I wasn't top, but just did the stuff, got on with it. Like it's one of these things that certainly now, having kind of taught students at uni and things like that, you get a lot of these people who are like, okay, exactly how much work do I need to do in order to get a passing grade for this course? Like to the point where they're kind of working out which questions they can afford to not revise for. And I'm like, hang on, why are you here? Like, if you're not here to just absorb as much information as you possibly can and, improve yourself and enjoy this subject, then that feels a little bit wrong to me, that you're not there to, get really stuck into it. You're there to sort of do the absolute bare minimum. And I know for some people it's, it's a lot of work and they've got to have a job and they've got to do all these other things at the same time. And they do have to kind of prioritize a little bit that way. But you get some people who are really kind of counting marks and kind of going to the lecturer and complaining because they didn't get quite the mark they were expecting. It's like, well, you should have done better on the assignment,
It sounds like it would almost be more work to manage how to find out how little work work you have to do.
And I never really get that as an idea because, you know, it's obviously someone who thinks they're clever and they're applying their skills. But to me, it was just like stick my head in this big pile of cool, interesting stuff and absorb as much of it as possible. And I suspect that is just as effective in terms of how well you do in the exams. So that was my approach to it.
As you go through these first years of university and, you know, you start to see the whole world of mathematics open up before you, is it crystallizing it all in your mind about what your future could be, what career you might want, what your path is, or is it still, I don't know, everything's an option?
Yeah, I think it was still steadfastly not making a decision yet. For a good while, and I kind of almost didn't decide what I wanted to do afterwards until just at the end of undergrad. So it was a 4-year undergrad course. I came out of it with a master's, and at the end of undergrad, I was sort of like, oh, I don't really know what to do next. Like, is there any way I can put off making a decision about what I want to do with my life for a bit longer? And I acknowledge that this is the worst possible reason to do a PhD, but a few of my friends were also doing a PhD. I was like, oh, maybe I could do that.
Okay.
Like I was peer pressured into it because they were like, yeah, of course you could do that. You'll be great. And I was genuinely partly like, are you sure that I would be good enough to do that? And I don't know if that's just imposter syndrome or whatever. I've always sort of had that as a constant companion. Yeah. But part of me was like, yeah, but it sounds really hard. And they were like, yeah, you'll be fine. You just, you know, you're into maths. You'll love it. Yeah. So like, I went along with the cool kids and did a PhD straight off the back of my undergrad. Was
your course particularly male dominated? Was it a good mix of men and women? What was it like then?
It was okay, actually. Maths at undergrad tends to be pretty evenly split, and I don't know why that is. There's obviously something weird about maths that kind of you do tend to get a reasonable number of women on the course.
Right.
It does drop off once you get to research level.
Right.
So kind of PhD level, it was me and the 4 other girls. And, you know, that makes a big difference. And I think also you don't see it represented in the lecturers. There were maybe 2 female lecturers in our department.
Having done it, having walked the path, has it given you any insights as to why there's that sort of dropping away as you start moving into sort of PhD land and beyond?
It's kind of hard to say, I guess. There's a lot of personal decisions, I guess, that make a difference. To some extent, it might be about why people are choosing to do a maths degree. One completely valid reason to do a maths degree is because it sets you up for a good career in finance or accounting or, you know, actuarial science or something that is well paid and solid and dependable. And I sort of got a sense that the people who were, I mean, I'm not saying this is the only 2 types of people that do a maths degree, but there are some people who enjoy maths and go and do a maths degree because they want maths. And there are some people who go and do a maths degree because they want a maths degree. And I think maybe girls tend to be more in the second category. Maybe they want to go and teach maths or they want to go and do something else with it.
Right.
This is a massive generalization, but it may be that that's part of the reason. Also, I mean, research is massively intimidating. You know, it's a competitive environment and it's widely acknowledged that it's basically horrific in terms of how stressful it is and how much pressure there is on you to constantly be doing things and producing work and publishing. And I think that, you know, that there's this potential idea that women kind of take a look at that and go, actually, you know what? No. And go and do something else, which is a completely sensible decision. But I think, you know, in terms of how that environment works, there's a lot of improvement that could be made in terms of how well that as a career actually functions and how inviting that is to people. Because there'll be a lot of people who get put off from that, not just women, but people who could do a really good maths research career who just don't because of that.
How do you improve that? I imagine there is some benefit to, you know, the competitiveness and the ruthlessness of mathematics because it, you know, it drives the subject forward, that kind of, you know, will to prove. But you're right, it does create this intimidating atmosphere as well. Like how would you even start to think? I know it's not your job alone to, you know, change the culture of mathematics, but do you have any thoughts on what could be done?
It's part of the nature of it, right? If you want to be the best university and get all of the grants and get all of the prestige, you need people to be producing stuff. But it's just it's about kind of what the job of a lecturer is, what the job of a researcher at a uni is, because there's this massive overlap with lecturing. And depending on the university, sometimes you get this sense that people are there to do their research and there's this inconvenience of lecturing alongside that they occasionally have to, lower themselves to. Obviously, there are some absolutely brilliant maths lecturers that put so much work into their teaching, but at the same time, it's not really considered a priority, which is weird because at the same time, the university's main priority is how many students can we get through, how much funding can we get in from students. So there's this weird kind of mismatch with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're in a culture where the only thing that's considered to be a good output is how much, research funding you've pulled in or whatever, then you do need to really work on publishing hard. And it's whether if everyone else took the brakes off slightly, if the levels that people were working at were slightly lower, people could take a bit more time over things, be a bit more considered. But, game theoretically, there's no incentive for anyone to do that. You always got to keep pushing. And that's just kind of the nature of it. And I guess it's true in a lot of other subjects as well, not just in maths.
You're starting a PhD, so obviously by now you have some kind of specialization. What's your what are you doing for your PhD? What's your area of expertise within mathematics? And what is the probability that I will understand it in any way whatsoever?
Well, this was interesting because I kind of didn't choose it in some sense. I was sort of just like, yeah, I'll do whatever, some maths, it'll be great.
You sound very easygoing, Katie.
I don't even remember being this easygoing, but I was kind of like, I think it's always a thing that I've done. So like when I was in the brass band, I was there from like the age of about 8 up to 18 and had to leave then because it was a youth band and they don't let you carry on when you're not a child. It's annoying. I started off, as everyone does, at the kind of the bottom end of the back row, as it's known, and a lot of people kind of work their way up. So as they get older and they get better, they sort of progress upwards. And I was a third cornet to start with, and for ages I was just like, no, it's all right, I'll stay on third cornet because it's important that there's someone here that's good, that's doing a solid job of playing the third cornet part.
Well, someone's got to do it.
Yeah, and people around me were like, but do you not want to be second cornet or first cornet? And I was like, no, I'm happy, I'm fine here. And I wonder if I've got this sort of sense of not prioritizing my own achievement or whatever, and I'm just happy to be doing a thing that's going well.
So when you left the youth band at age 18, were you still third cornet?
No, I was on the front row by then. I did eventually progress. Someone was just like, no, this is ridiculous, get off third corner.
Okay.
But like, I never pushed for it, I guess. And I don't know if it was sort of a fear of wanting to stay doing the thing that I know I can do and not trying something new. And, to some extent, I've tried to counter that in my adult life by always kind of pushing myself and making myself do things that I'm not completely sure I'm ready for yet, with a slight awareness that that's something that people don't do enough of, but also not doing it too much. Yeah, but I wanted to do a PhD. I'd made this decision and I wasn't really sure what to do it in. But there was a lecturer in dynamical systems. So kind of studying the motions of things that evolve over time. He was stealing PhD students from topology. So topology was the topic that I'd done for my kind of final year project in fourth year. I'd done a thing on, what was it called? It was kind of a topology geometry thing. And I'd started to get into this idea of topology because it's not a subject you necessarily even cover even in a maths degree unless you get the right combination of lecturers. Some maths degrees don't even cover it much at all.
Right.
But I'd gotten kind of into it. So it's this idea of sort of shapes and thinking about things in different numbers of dimensions and ways to categorize and describe shapes and things like that. And essentially, this dynamical systems lecturer was stealing ideas from topology and stealing PhD students as well. So he was, they're a valid crossover. So Morse theory is a nice sort of crossover between dynamical systems and topology.
Okay.
And there are various other things that you can do to connect them. And he just basically went, do you want to do this? Like a friend of mine was doing a project in the year above. So she was already on a PhD doing a similar kind of thing, and he's like, yeah, I've got space for another PhD student doing this slightly different aspect to the same topic. And I was like, yeah, okay, because it was sort of related to the stuff that I already knew, sort of something a bit new that I hadn't done much on, so I had to kind of learn a lot of the dynamic stuff from scratch at that point, having not done that much applied maths in my undergrad. Technically, my PhD certificate says PhD in applied maths on it, which is completely nonsense because I'm not an applied mathematician.
Right.
It's one of the many contradictions about my existence. And it was looking at n-body problems, so thinking about, groups of particles moving around in space.
Yeah.
And trying to apply ideas from topology. So thinking about the shapes that they're drawing and thinking about how to categorize the shapes, how to look at the symmetries of them, look at the ways that you can simplify stuff to try and get some kind of classification. And in particular, we were looking at a thing called choreographies, which as you can probably guess from the name, involve things that are sort of dancing in a very nice pattern.
Yeah.
So it's, if you imagine, a set of particles orbiting, but they're all following the same path one after the other. And if you take the whole system and time delay it, you get the same thing, but the particles have moved around one. So there's various different symmetries in this, because there might be symmetries in the shape of the path that they're moving around on, but there'll also be kind of time symmetries that you can kind of push it forward in time and get to the same spot, except all the particles have moved around one. And then there's also kind of a permutation in there as well, because you can move the particles around in a cyclic permutation. So there's that aspect of symmetry as well. So it was kind of a project about sort of looking at these choreographies and saying, okay, what possible things are there, given this set of rules that they have to all do the same thing? How do we describe them all?
Was it hard doing a PhD?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should be, yeah. It was a kind of alternating nightmare of not having any idea what I was doing, and then having loads of stuff to do, and then suddenly not knowing what I was doing again. People say that doing a PhD is 90% being stuck.
Yeah.
And I think that is very much true of doing research in maths. Like, you're not constantly making progress. You're often just kind of stalled and going, I don't really know what to do with this, or I don't know how this works, or I can't see how to prove this thing. And then you think about it and you look at something else and you read a thing and you talk to someone and then you go, oh my God, I can do that. And then you do the thing and it's like, great, I've done a thing. Right, now I have to do another thing. Okay. And it's just that over and over again for 3 years, which is, I mean, for some people, it's really demoralizing. And if you kind of go into it without an awareness of the fact that you will spend time thinking, I know nothing at all, what am I doing here? Then it can be really bad. And I know some people who dropped out, who kind of found that it didn't really suit them to be in this kind of environment. But it was a lot of kind of peer support and chatting to each other and going, no, that is completely normal, don't worry, was the way that a lot of people got through it, I think.
So as you come towards the end of your PhD, you must surely now be thinking, what am I going to do when I grow up?
Yeah. Yeah, I realised I couldn't get away with that any longer. But luckily something came along that I was interested in doing. And there was this kind of, so a lot of people were telling me, oh, you're really good at explaining things. You're good at teaching stuff.
Were you? Why is that? Were you doing like exposition on the side, or like how did people know you were good at that?
I don't know. It's just like a knack that I had for it, that when people were like...
So it would just be, they would just know it from the pub then, like, oh, you're always good at explaining things in the pub or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, I guess sort of, yeah, in that kind of thing. And we did a little bit of demonstrating and teaching during the PhD. Like, they allow you to do paid work teaching for lower years.
Okay.
But it never proper teaching, like just the sort of, doing the tutorial sessions or whatever.
Yeah.
I'd kind of generally always been told by people that I was good at that.
Yeah.
And I talked to my mum, who, as I mentioned, worked in mental health. And she said, well, the unit at work is full of maths teachers who've had nervous breakdowns. Don't be a maths teacher, will you? And I was like, well, that's a strong argument.
Yeah.
Like, I'm the kind of person who cares deeply about things and invests a load of my emotional kind of energy into things. And if I found something incredibly stressful, my mum basically said, I don't think you could handle the stress. And I was like, well,
okay,
that's, potentially a reasonable comment. And I have so much respect for maths teachers, because they do absolutely fantastic work, and it's incredible what they're expected to do, and the ones that do it and then also do a bunch of other extra stuff on top. It's just unbelievable. But a small part of me was sort of like, I kind of agree with my mum. Like, as lovely as it would be to have a really nice sort of solid career as a maths teacher, yeah, I can sort of see that argument. And around about that time, there was a conference that they ran in Manchester. It was kind of a one-off conference that no one had done before, called How to Talk Maths in Public.
Okay.
And they basically pulled together a bunch of people who communicate maths. So like people who do talks, people who write books about maths, people who make TV shows, like anyone in the UK maths communication community. I brought them all together. And I had just got involved with a little project that someone was doing called maths busking, which was this idea to kind of take mathematical ideas and just show them to people, either in the street or in a context where you were kind of just going like, have you seen this thing? Isn't it cool?
Yeah.
And just sort of using the innate interestingness of bits of maths to engage people. Kind of like the way that, you tell someone a joke and they would go, haha, that's excellent. And then they'd go and tell someone else the same joke. So that kind of viral almost, but in real life, aspect of that. And the maths busking thing, we'd done a couple of training sessions, and we'd done a couple of like science festivals where we'd gone and sort of stood around and talked to people in around the science festival. But we were invited to go to this conference to sort of show some of the work that we'd been doing with maths busking and talk about it. And it was in the building where I worked. So I was like, yeah, that's fine. I can go to this.
Yeah.
But it was really eye-opening to see that there is such a thing as the maths communication community. You know, it's not just a weird thing that I'm doing as a hobby on the side of my PhD. It's actually a job. It's a career for a lot of people, and in 100 different ways, people are doing this, and they're kind of making their own niche, and they're doing things in their own way, or they're working with others to build something.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really inspiring to see that this is actually a proper thing. Almost, it hadn't occurred to me before. So,
Katie, was it inspiring because you love mathematics and love communicating it, and like that kind of altruistic math disciple type thing? Or was it inspiring because you thought, oh my goodness, I could earn money doing this. I could pay for a mortgage. I can eat and still do something I'm good at and I like.
Yeah, maybe a bit of both, I guess. Like with that kind of awareness in the back of my mind that I'm going to have to get a job eventually. Yeah. Like, actually, this is not just a hobby. This is a valid job. Yeah. And I could use this to fill that gap. And also the inspiration that actually I wouldn't be on my own doing this. I'd kind of gone into the maths busking thing with a kind of attitude of like, well, I already have regular experiences of making an idiot of myself in the street. I might as well do that while talking about maths. Yeah. And it was kind of just an experiment, I guess. But through that, I made some connections that kind of gave me an insight into actually there's people who would let me come and do talks, or they would pay me to come and do this. And I thought, well, I finished my PhD in summer. I'll give it 6 months. I'll try being a freelance maths communicator. I'll just do whatever comes along. Yeah. I had a little bit of money to fall back on to do that. So I wasn't too worried about not having a proper job for 6 months. But if at the end of 6 months I haven't got enough work and it's a complete nightmare, I'll sack it in and get a proper job. But I'm going to try it. And I had the support of my other half, and I was in a good situation to do that. And it really frustrates me that a lot of the kind of science and maths communication scene is founded on the idea that people can afford to work for free for a little while. It really annoys me because there's a lot of people who can't do that. And I feel incredibly privileged to have been in the situation where I could do that. But I'm always trying to kind of give opportunities to people, and if possible paid opportunities, to try and kind of balance this out, because I feel like the universe has given me this massive kind of pile of karma that I need to dish out. But yeah, it was a bit of an experiment, and I started doing some talks in schools and some workshops and doing masterclass sessions for the Royal Institution, and doing bits of these maths busking jobs, and it kind of worked. So I kind of just kept doing it.
That's pretty amazing, though. Like, were you hustling hard? Like, were you like always on the phone and email and pestering people for work? Like, I imagine a lot of people who dream of doing what you just did would think, how did you get them to say yes?
Again, I was very lucky in terms of the connections that I managed to make. So some of the people that were involved in the maths busking project essentially just sort of took me under a wing and shepherded me and gave me opportunities. Right. So in particular, Matt Parker, who you may or may not be familiar with.
I've heard of him.
Crushingly familiar with. So he, at the time, was kind of taking off in his sort of maths communication career, and he'd got involved in this project. And he was like, I've now just got to the point where I'm getting too many emails to answer myself. Yeah. So as a part-time job that I just sort of billed hourly, I would do Matt's emails. And this was like...
That's how we met.
Yeah, it was like a conversation in a pub where we were just like, he was just like, oh, it's getting, effort. And I was like, well, you know what? I've got some time and interest. So I did that for a little while. And it was really useful, actually, to see the back end of a maths communicator's kind of life. Yeah. What that kind of contacting schools and organising talks and bookings and all of that kind of stuff, how that all worked. So that was a really good insight. Yeah. But it also meant that I could answer emails that came in that had slightly mathsy questions in. So it was useful for Matt, though. I could, I had a sort of secret code that if I was pretending to be Matt, I would answer a particular sign off on the email. But if it was an easy question that I could answer, I would answer it. And, it was an incredible opportunity and really helpful. And I'm very, very grateful to Matt for that kind of initial thing, because he also put me in touch with people to do talks and that kind of thing. He was doing schools talks and getting too many bookings as well. So he was like, oh, I can send you in place of me if people are happy for me to do that. And we kind of developed a set of talks that he already did and kind of built versions that I could do, that I could then take into schools. And we had a couple of other people that did them as well at the time. So we kind of started a little company, which became Think Maths.
Yeah.
And that kind of went from there. And that was a major part of the work that I was doing schools talks for Think Maths for a good number of years.
Yeah. Yeah. You had your break. What have you evolved into since?
It's hard to say, really. I wake up in the morning, think, what am I? I'm still a mathematician, so I've never kind of lost that love of maths, but I just basically do whatever comes along. And in the interim, I've done so many different kind of weird projects and random things that have just come along, either because someone's seen me do a thing and thought, oh, they're all right, let's get them to do this other thing. So I've done, as well as the sort of standard science festivals, talks, workshops, things like theatre projects. So someone was doing a theatre show about the Poincare conjecture, and I was like, yeah, I know some topology. I could talk about the Poincare conjecture, and I did sort of consulting on that to make sure that the maths in the show was right, but also did a little workshop that was performed alongside the show to explain the Poincare conjecture in half an hour to an entirely lay audience, which is a good initial challenge as a communicator. I was like, I'll need some inflatables and some plasticine.
Yeah.
Give me half an hour and some inflatables and plasticine, and I will explain the Poincare conjecture for you.
Okay.
And things like I did a residency in an art gallery for 2 weeks. Someone was like, we want a mathematician in residence doing some kind of art thing in this art gallery on a uni campus, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'll do that, put something together. And it's been a bit of that kind of pushing myself to try new things. I've ended up doing all sorts of stuff, writing, podcasting, YouTube videos.
What I will do, definitely, obviously, is link to Katie's website in the notes for this podcast, because you can scroll down the list. It's a little bit overwhelming, the number of things you're involved in, and you do.
Yeah, I need to update that. There's a couple of projects on there that I haven't put on yet.
This will be a good excuse for you to do an update. I will point people there. Could you tell us perhaps just one thing you're doing at the moment that you're most excited by? What's the thing that's getting you really fired up?
Recently, I've had a very weird experience that I imagine a lot of freelancers have also gone through, which is that, lockdown has happened, and it's meant that a lot of my live work has disappeared, which is annoying because that's kind of fun stuff. Thankfully, I've got plenty of non-live sort of writing work to fall back on. But I've had a couple of people who've come to me and said, well, we're going to try and do an online version. So Cheltenham Science Festival did a fully online version this summer, and they said, we want to try and do some online workshops. And they've come to me as someone who's done a bunch of in-person workshops there in the past that they know is a solid kind of bet. Could you try and do something online? And I was like, well, I'd not thought about kind of specifically running online workshops. I was kind of just going to wait until this all blows over, but I realized that's probably not a practical solution long term. So I ended up developing kind of online stuff that I could do remotely, and it, not just me stood in front of a camera doing the talk that I would do in person, but thinking about how the people on the other end can get involved. What, can I send them to a website where they get to play with a thing and click on stuff, and can I get them thinking about a thing and then feeding back and sharing their answers, and trying to sort of model what I would do in a real workshop, but also not too closely, because this isn't a real workshop and everything's weird and different, and trying to kind of incorporate that as well. So having been kind of asked to do that, I developed a thing, but now I'm like, I could do more of these. So there's like me and a few other people that I'm working with to kind of put together online workshops and training. And that's kind of exciting because it's sort of a new medium. It's not a thing that people have done much of. I suspect there are people who have done it before, but specifically thinking about, I've got an audience of people, all of whom are just sat in their house. Like, how do I make this feel like they're at an event and experiencing a thing together? So that's kind of cool.
What would you say motivates you? Because I don't pretend to know you really well, but and you're obviously a good speaker and good in videos, but you also seem to be someone who does a lot of behind the scenes stuff. You do a lot of third corner type work. You're always the person who's organizing things and doing all the behind the scenes. And someone will always say to me, oh yeah, we've got this event happening, talk to Katie. She's the one who knows everything that's going on and stuff. So you're a really good behind the scenes organizer too. What gives you the buzz? What keeps you working so hard on all this stuff?
I think I just like making things happen. I find logistics immensely satisfying, and certainly having done a bunch of work in the sort of project management stuff. Yeah. So one of the things that Matt got me to do quite a lot was, he was like, I would like to do a ridiculous large thing with maths. And I was like, I will Google some stuff, and kind of did the sort of project management and the managing the finance and the kind of corralling volunteers and all this kind of stuff, and chipping in with ideas about the thing itself and how to communicate it and that kind of thing. So it was a good sort of collaboration relationship, because I was good at the stuff that Matt is less strong on, like answering emails. And he was there with the sort of ideas and the brand and the presence.
Yeah.
And we'd kind of work together on things like that. And I would do all of the tedious admin stuff, which meant he didn't have to. I feel like I've almost had a sort of personal revelation there when you describe that as third Cornet stuff. I kind of just realised that's exactly what that is. But I think it's also a very important aspect of it. And I know a lot of people that I've worked with over the years that have been professional project managers, and it's incredible how much work they have to do that people just don't appreciate at all. So it's good for me to see kind of both sides of that. And I feel like it makes me better as a presenter to work with, because I could go to a science festival and they'd say, can you do this? And I'd say, well, I know what you want me to say is this, but here is why, and here's what we could do instead. And like I've got a view from both sides almost.
You talk about calling yourself a mathematician. That's what we talked about right at the start. Do you ever wish you'd gone down a more conventional mathematician path, or do you think that wouldn't have been for you? You know, would you like to have proved the Riemann hypothesis?
Well, I think I had a moment at the end of my PhD where I had to sort of sit down and think to myself, do I go into this psychom career, or do I go into like a postdoc and do more research? And a large part of me just went, I have done enough maths research. Like the amount of time that I have spent bashing my head against the wall of maths is enough. I am happy with the amount that I've done. And for me personally, this is kind of sufficient for me to have got a feeling for how this subject works. And I've done something, I've contributed, I've written this thesis and I've published a paper, but maths is welcome to that. I can have it. And I'm now going to go and do something else because I've enjoyed this very much, but it's also been incredibly difficult. And I think one thing that's actually been really interesting to me is in the last couple of years, I managed to get a part-time post lecturing in maths at Sheffield Hallam University. And that has been really cool because to some extent, like while I'm doing my maths communication stuff, I'm always talking about kind of higher level maths stuff. I'm talking about university level maths often with school age people or with general audiences. And that's brilliant. But I'm not kind of really doing maths at that level. And it's always felt like a slightly that I'm not quite in there with the mathematicians. Whereas having done this teaching at university level, I could really get my hands dirty and get stuck in and do this proper stuff. And I'm explaining it and discovering that actually I've got all these nice explanations for this stuff at that level as well. And having some really nice moments in class where people ask me a question, I'm like, well, here's a really nice analogy for that. And they're like, oh, I get it now. And that's been really wonderful to sort of, I hate to use the phrase do some proper maths for a change, because a lot of the stuff that I talk about to other audiences is proper maths, but I always have to kind of temper it with like, there's some extra conditions that you have to put in here for this to work, but it definitely works. Whereas at the uni level, I can be like, oh, it's these things. Like, here's the proper definition. Here's how this all fits together. Here's this beautiful structure that you can build out of maths, and here's how it works. And kind of watching people discover that is really nice.
I almost feel silly asking you this because you seem like someone who just sort of tumbles from one thing to the next and doesn't look too far ahead. But do you have a grand plan or an ambition or a thing you really want to make happen or do down the track that you're working towards or hoping will happen one day? I'm
to some extent still resisting the idea of deciding what I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I've started getting involved with while I've been at Sheffield Hallam is bits of research into not maths, but specifically maths communication. So research into teaching methods and into how people interact with maths communication activities. And we've been doing a bit of research into like, if you watch number file videos when you're a kid, does it increase your chances of going and doing maths at uni and things like that, which is obviously a very difficult thing to pin down, but kind of looking at that potentially going more into that kind of stuff might be fun, but I don't know. And I guess I'm also just open to whatever comes along, really.
Yeah.
I've done okay with people just approaching me and saying, do you want to do this thing? I've done bits of TV stuff, which has been fun, but a nightmare and difficult, and TV is awful, but it's also brilliant. Potentially something like that, but I don't know where that would go. Like, I am genuinely open. I've got an idea for a book, haven't written it yet.
Yeah.
Some part of me feels like I need to maybe put the brakes on a little bit and reduce the number of different projects I'm working on at any given time.
Yeah.
But I don't need to yet. I've still got the energy to keep going with this, I think, for a bit longer. So,
can you tell us a little bit about the Talking Maths in Public? What do we call it? Is it a business or a program or a project? It's a project, isn't it?
It's a project, yeah. I think we're technically a trust.
Right.
on paper. But this was kind of having gone to the How to Talk Maths in Public conference all those years ago and having had that experience of like, oh, wow, this is a thing. I kind of want to give that to other people. Like I want there to be people who are, still at uni or at that kind of age who are looking for something to do to realize that this is an industry and a career and a thing. So there's a conference called Matrix, which is a maths communication type conference that's run every 2 years. And 1 year recently it was in Leeds, and I was there with a few other people who were all saying this is like an international one that moves around. So I think it's going to be in Paris this year, and it's been in various different countries. Why isn't there a UK one of these? Because there's certainly a large community of maths communicators. And we all just looked at each other and went, should we just make one? So we decided to do a conference for maths communicators in the UK, and it could be, training and workshops and discussion sessions and networking and chances to meet other people doing maths communication, but just mainly to give people that experience of feeling part of a group. So I've done loads of stuff on that now. That's become another kind of branch of my work, is running this conference and running various online events of tangential to it as well.
It was good. I went to the most recent one. When was it? I can't remember when it was. Was it
2019? Yeah.
2019. I was lucky enough to come along, and it was fantastic. It was very motivational to get all the people in one place and mixing, and like not just hearing ideas and hearing people talk, but also just like the networking side of it was fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's useful to see, like, if you're either the one maths person in the place where you are, or the one person that's doing outreach in the maths department where you are, or the kind of feeling slightly lonely if you're a freelancer, say, to just go and be in a room full of other people who do the same thing and who communicate maths in all these different ways. That's a really nice aspect of it, but it's also useful training.
You talk about like looking at math communication with a more sort of critical or research eye. So obviously you spend a lot of time thinking and talking about the best and worst ways to communicate mathematics. Have you got one insight or secret source or clue or puzzle or anything that you would say to someone who might be listening to this who wants to be a math communicator? One thing that everyone gets wrong or a few people get right? What would be like a nugget you'd drop?
I guess to pick one, which I think might be quite useful universally, is to always remember that the person that you're talking to doesn't have the same experience of maths as you do. So like I, as a person who's, at the level where I'm teaching maths in a university, always got on okay with it, enjoyed it very much, went through it. If I now talk to someone who's at school, who's either, missed a chunk of teaching or struggled with it for whatever reason, their experience of maths is very different to mine. And the one really nice bit of advice would be, don't kind of make assumptions about that. So like, don't say, oh, we're going to do this one next, it's an easy one. Because if someone doesn't find it easy, that really kind of, slams the door down for them, because they're like, oh, well, I'm not finding this easy, so obviously that must be my fault. And I try never to describe something as being easy or kind of make any prejudgments about how people are going to interact with something. I'll say something's interesting or fun or, whatever, but I won't kind of tell people how they feel about something, I guess. And I feel like that may be useful advice.
That is good advice. How do you feel about taking it the other way? Sort of people who say, look, I know maths is hard. I know maths sucks, but let me show you this. Like, do you avoid that, or will you sometimes fall into that?
I mean, if anyone directly asks me, then I will definitely agree that maths is hard. And it's a quote from the ever-present Matt Parker that I often repeat for people is, mathematicians aren't people who find maths easy. They're people who enjoy the fact that it's difficult, right? So it's kind of wanting that puzzle and wanting the thing that's going to challenge you. Yeah. And I think a lot of the problems that people have with maths are because they don't realize that it's normal to feel like it's difficult. Like they look at something and they go, I don't really know what to do here. And because they're not trained to go, let's ignore the fact that I don't know what to do here and just try something anyway, that they kind of are more likely to give up too soon, I guess. And it's partly to do with the fact that the way we teach maths is very much there is a correct answer. You've got to do this. You've got to get the right answer. And if you're not getting this right answer, it's because you're bad and you don't know what you're doing. And I know no one would ever deliberately say that to someone, but that is kind of the impression that comes across from the way maths is sometimes taught. And you've kind of got to get across to people that actually finding it difficult is normal. And the way that you'll succeed with it is if you find it difficult, feel the fear and do it anyway, I guess is the thing people say. And I think mathematicians tend to be people who are just prepared to get stuck in and have a go, regardless of whether they actually feel like they've got a handle on it yet. Just try some stuff and see what happens.
Well, Katie, if one of the defining traits of a mathematician is someone who's willing to work very hard and do things that are difficult. You are definitely a mathematician. The third corner of mathematics.
Maybe, yeah.
Well, that's all for today. Thanks to Katie for her time, and as always, I'll include links to her stuff in the show notes. Do go and have a look, and make sure you're following Katie on things like Twitter so you can find out when she's doing all those online workshops and other things she mentioned. Now, I know it's a bit of a podcast cliche, but please also consider reviewing and rating this podcast. It just helps us become that little bit more visible and means we're better placed to make even more episodes. You can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/numberphile. I'm Brady Harron, and you've been listening to the Numberphile podcast. We'll be back again soon.